Good evening, YouTube. I thought I would do a video about the way I see this time of year. I know that I have talked about why I have my green bowl on my table altar, and as I think it represents the womb of the goddess, and the black candle that I have inside of it in water. It's about the bringing back of light. And I know that traditionally Yule is supposed to be the birth of the Sun King coming back. But I don't see it as a birth. I see it as the conception. Um, and that's where I differ in how I look at things, because it never made sense to me before how you were supposed to say that at Yule, when we're still basically at the start of winter, because that's what the winter solstice is the start of winter. Even though it is the shortest day, and it means that it is the coming back of the sun, it is far from the summer solstice, which is at him at his height. Pregnancy, to me, conception, is that spark of life, that spark of light that comes back. The pregnancy symbolizes the hope that sustained everybody through the long winter. Generally, December was a time when the snows would really get started good, but December is not usually the coldest month. It's generally February, which we're heading into. So it's a far cry from being spring, and when things are coming back, planting and stuff like that. We may be preparing for it, but this time of year for me is the pregnant goddess, and she's nesting. Any woman who's ever been pregnant knows that you go from conception to the quickening. And that's what I liken Yule to, is that time of quickening where you know life is there, and it's the hope and the promise of things to come. But it's still fragile, and things can go wrong. So although it offers hope, there's also a period of time where you're still going through the dark nights. You're still worried about whether or not the food will hold out for the family before you can plant again and have renewed hope of food coming back. But the pregnancy is the promise. And then going into January and into February, into Imbolc, there comes a point where you start cleaning and clearing and decluttering. You start preparing and nesting, just like a pregnant woman would do on the impending birth of her baby. She starts pinning all of her hopes on the birth of this child. And that's what I liken the Imbolc season to. It's when the goddess is in full nesting mode, actually. The earth has not come forth with all of the promises of spring yet, but is pregnant with that life just beneath the surface, just beneath the snow, just beneath the cold. Days are still very, very gloomy a lot of the time with the winter weather. The snow, the ice, the the wind, the cold wind. Um, but we know that as Imbolc comes, and the whole reason Groundhog Day is the day of Imbolc as well. And I know that the Celts and had a different, it was the bear, the badger, or maybe in different points in history it was one. It started out, I think, as the bear and also as the badger. But as it came to America, it became Groundhog Day. But the principle was the same. We look to the groundhog to tell us and foretell whether spring is around the corner or we'll have 6 more weeks of winter. 6 more weeks of winter to people who lived so close to the land and had so much of their life wrapped up in their stores from the harvest times and stuff. But by this time, the coffers are usually a lot bare, and the chances of death are never so close to at the point of the point in which the promise of spring is just at the corner. So there's a lot of people who wouldn't make it to see spring again. But everything about the Yule season on is about bringing back the sun, about helping the sun grow, about, and to me, it was not the born again Sun King, but the king that we waited for the impending birth. Child was here, it was pregnant, it was in the mother, but that didn't ensure it's coming back yet. Why Imbolc to me symbolizes so much the importance of the first milk was because that was another substance that they could also, even though they offered the first milk back as a libation, it meant that the milk coming back meant that they could again have one more nourishment to help them hang on until they could plant and start eating the youngest of the tender greens coming back up after the snow had gone. It's a time of preparing the seeds and getting them ready, starting them in flats inside. The ones that have to be wintered over, they're already being prepared. Everything was about the turning of the wheel and what the next preparations were for the next season. So to me, the birth doesn't happen until Easter, Ostara. And why Christ rises at Easter. Yes, in his story, it was because he rose from the dead. But I think for the Sun King, it is the true birth, because at that point, that's when the god and goddess are separated again, and the whole of earth springs forth in life again. The spring is where the babies are born. The spring is where the plants start sprouting again. Flowers come back. The sun actually clears. The days are cool, but they are not anything like the treacherous winter that we just came through. That kind of thing. So I liken Imbolc to the nesting period of the goddess. And that's the only way it truly makes sense to me. To say that he's born, and then we could say that this is the child years of the god, doesn't sit well with me in the way that the story needs to be told. There isn't much that shows the pregnancy of the goddess. So, to me, everything that we do naturally at this time of year represents that pregnancy. And so I feel the true birth of the sun comes back at the spring equinox. and when things equal out and the sun becomes strong again. Um, so I liken the the sun coming, but yet not being to a strength is in the pregnancy, to where, because we don't really see evidence that winter is over. How can winter be over when the winter solstice is the beginning and the marking of winter? So to me, it just makes more sense to look at it as the pregnancy time of the goddess. Um, the time of going inward, preparing, clearing the way, nesting, decluttering, purification. The purification part of the internal body, of the actual time when people start body cleansing, as well as a natural thing that they've done for centuries and centuries. Well, it would seem to me very apropos at a time when your coffers are bare, you don't have the food supply that you once had. You ate what you had to eat, what you had left, but then became a time of fasting. Maybe not even the way you wanted to, but naturally the food supplies are waning down. So even animals tend to be more on the lean side. They're fasting as well too, waiting for the spring to come back and be full of the harvest. So to me, everything about this season makes more sense to consider it as that the God is not truly born yet, but he's here, but he's present inside the mother. He's still being protected by the mother. She is fixing to give forth, give birth, manifest, all of that kind of stuff is fixing to come forth through her womb. And it is just a very natural cycle. I think I've said in another video that Imbolc used to be one of the hardest times for me to understand. And that was the reason, because all of what I heard, I knew was the norm, the myths, the legends, the folklore around what was going on, but it didn't quite fit. And I think that there was something kind of missing out of that interpretation. And to me, once I likened it to the pregnancy period, I've given birth 3 times. So I know that urge to nest, to cleanse, to purify, and it just makes perfect sense that that was what was going on. It is the time of the year that we do those things naturally, and women do it every time they are pregnant. Um, Even the women who are not the very domesticated homemakers, once pregnant, and once you start getting towards the end of that pregnancy, your need to cleanse, purify, and prepare just start happening. It is part of a hormonal cycle in a woman, and to me, it just feels like a natural flow. And once I recognized that and did that, everything about the wheel of the year just kind of seemed to flow in a harmony, in a balance. And no other time does it feel right to talk about a pregnancy of the goddess. This is the time of the year. And I think that's why as soon as the goddess gives birth, we can go right back into the time of the maiden again. But to me, Samhain was the time of the crone, Mabon to Samhain. But to me, the mother takes over um, at Yule, and she's preparing to give birth, but she's also preparing to go back to the maiden status again. So it seems like they flow back and forth with each other instead of maiden going to mother, going to crone. So that's the way I look at it. I look at the vegetation in the fields as more um, the things that thrive under the Sun King, and then we harvest those things. But at the harvest, it's the time of the killing of the god. So it's the John Barleycorn time of the year. Um, and it just seems to just flow a little better for me when I start looking at it in that way. I've been listening to Witches of the Moon right now, and they're doing some wonderful stuff about Imbolc at the moment. And I just thought I'd kind of put those thoughts out there because I don't think that anybody I've heard actually kind of sees it my way. And I don't necessarily, I'm not trying to convince anybody or to think that I am right. I just know that this is the way my brain flows with it, and this is how I have now made these Sabbats my own. It just flows so much better for me. But that was just some thoughts on Imbolc, and I didn't know what maybe y'all thought, and I sure would like to hear y'all's opinion on how y'all think of these Sabbats. And if you think of everything in the very traditional ways, or if you tweak these things to make better sense and more fluidity for yourself. And if so, how do you change the Sabbats and how you think of them? At this time, it's Yule to Imbolc, but I just think that it would be an interesting discussion to have in the thoughts of these Sabbats and how we put them in more practical terms for the life we live today versus how the Celts in Imbolc, I would say the Celts, but everybody's path's different, and I don't by any stretch of imagination think that everybody celebrates the Celtic way. But I would like to hear y'all's thoughts on this time of the season and even other names that you call Imbolc, because I don't know all the other paths, and there may be a larger selection of names from some of the other paths that are not recognized. I think most of the common ones that most people think of are the Wiccans or the Druids or um, the traditional Celtic paths, but I know there's so many more paths out there, and I would be interested to see what your path thoughts are at this time of the season. And I look forward to hearing some video responses. Thank you, and y'all have a great evening. Blessed be.